to start with today's topic, everything seems to have the word COVID suffice to it, right? So, a prefix to it, really. And we're talking about building careers in consulting in a COVID world. Consulting is often a um, very sought after career for a lot of young people, especially at business schools and in sort of engineering schools as well. So we'll address a lot of questions around that. What we will probably not get too deep into today is how to prepare for consulting. We will talk about some aspects of that in terms of skills and whatnot. But I think that will come in later sessions as well. We wanted first give everybody a very good, strong, overarching view. Um, yeah, so don't worry, you will get the recording shared. If there are questions around that, we'll put it on YouTube and this will be accessible. So don't worry about that. Okay, I think with that in mind, I'm very pleased to invite today Pranav Obhrai, a senior associate at BCG. Uh, he's a fellow alum from ISB, so very happy to host him. And he's had a spectacular career. He was from SRCC, he was top of the list there. He's a merit list at ISB. He's worked for some very amazing companies. He's worked at Uber. He's worked at Political Edge, where he did some very interesting consulting work on election strategy. It's very interesting. He also worked for Amplify.ai, and yeah, I think that's wonderful. And this is me, Abhishek. Probably you would have seen me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there with sort of the student community and sort of young professional community. Um, I've been an engineer, environmental engineer for a very long time. Did a lot of work there. I worked for Apple India in sales and strategy, and worked for Accenture for a very long period of time. And now I run MBA Trek. I've been doing it for a couple of years and really interested to unlock careers. Pranav, do you want to just
Yeah,
sort of quickly chat about how has consulting been for you? You've seen different aspects of consulting with,
yes,
let's say, a political edge versus a BCG. So just
yeah,
about more about yourself would be wonderful.
definitely. So, yeah, thank you for having me. It's actually my pleasure to be there. And yeah, I think, like I said, when I shared the post on LinkedIn, also, they will more, maybe draw more from you and your experience in consulting than mine. Um, that is one thing. But yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey up till now. Um, I, from my profile, you can see, have taken the not orthodox way, gone through startups also, did some amount of political consulting also, then went to ISB for an MBA, and now I've been at BCG. So yeah, I think we will talk more about consulting, like Abhishek said, ki what does it really mean? What goes into a consulting life really, and what type of cases are there, and how the growth in consulting can be. So we will cover all of that in time. We will answer all the questions, whether it is during the course of the discussion or the questions you submitted earlier. So yeah, I think we'll cover a lot about consulting. But the only one thing I'll say right now is that from my profile, it's evident that you can get into consulting at different stages in your career, and that way, consulting is fairly democratic. And I think whoever wants to do it has a good shot at it. So don't get worried upfront that whether I'll make it or not. You will have more chances to do it. And yeah, it's never a straight line. There's a lot of curves which happen, and the dots actually always join backwards, is what I feel right now. And I've been working for about 3-4 years, maybe slightly more. Um, and that's what I have understood so far. So
I think that's a wonderful way to sum it up, Pranav. I think one should not be worried about the fact that I'm not from a target school or I'm not top of my class or whatever. I was not top of my class at ISB. Pranav was. So we both worked in consulting.
yes,
Okay, good. Wonderful. So I think just laying out the agenda, this would be very consulting like to lay out the structure beforehand. And we're going to cover five things today. And along with that, we'll answer as many questions as we can for all of you. Pranav will be obviously our a guest speaker and expert, and we'll try to pitch in. We're going to talk about an overview of the consulting industry. What does a career in consulting actually look like? Because I think a lot of people don't have clarity on what does it take to be consultant, and what is the consulting life like, and what is the consulting growth or career like. What is the impact of COVID on consulting as a business? Because I think a lot of people still believe consulting is a great place to be. It is absolutely, but I think with every industry that we look, and something I tell a lot of students and young professionals that I work with, or we as a company, as MBA Track work with, is applying that lens of COVID. How is COVID affecting this industry? And I think then the next question which comes from that is, then therefore is consulting a good employer at this point, or how is it as an employer in general, and how is the whole COVID impact going to affect it? And finally, I think it's the white elephant in the room always. Everybody talks about it, that I need an MBA to get to consulting. So let's see if we can answer that question also for all of you. And we'll have Q&A at the end as well. But I think we will, once we finish a section or two, we'll take a logical break and probe you all for some questions. So please stay attentive. Please contribute. I think the question which is not asked is the silly question. I think there are no silly questions unless they're not
Right.
asked. So you may be you may have asked a question, but my answer or our answer could help five more people who have the same question but probably don't want to ask it. So right. So
Yeah.
don't hold back
Yeah.
there.
And we both are very nice people. We
Yeah.
seem visibly harmless as well. So yeah, even if you ask a silly question, we're good.
There are no judgments,
Yeah.
nothing. Right. Please. Um,
Yeah.
I think some of the names you've all seen, heard, aspired to, dreamt of, probably work in, or would have wanted to work in, or know somebody who's works there. The MBBs of the world, the McKinsey, Bain, BCG, AT Kearney, Deloitte, KPMG, Accenture, PwC. All these big names are there, right? MBB, yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so yes, these are some of the biggest names that we know in consulting. They've been around for a very long time. Most consulting companies are pretty tenured in the industry. An average company typically doesn't last for 20 years, but most consulting companies are older than that, right?
Yeah.
Especially the traditional ones. So they have been doing something right. I think that's something we have to understand. A lot of companies and industries don't survive for this long. Consulting has. Um, so so why has consulting survived so well? Because consulting has done something very interesting. They have taken all the important functions in management or in running a company, and they've gotten deep everywhere. So they've covered strategy, they've covered operations, they've covered HR, they've covered financial advisory, they even covered technology, which is probably the latest entrant on the corporate in the corporate setup per se. So consulting has been very smart that way, that it has covered or it made itself omnipresent everywhere. And I think that's something we must understand, that consulting exists across the entire corporate spectrum.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add here, Pranav?
No, I completely agree. The fact that they are so broad in terms of their industry coverage, in terms of their functional coverage, is pretty evident. And I just feel that we sometimes tend to hear more about the companies which are in the strategy or operation side, and sometimes a little more about those which are on the technology side. But there is a lot of play even going in the human resources, financial advisory as well. So I'll just give some names as examples, and maybe people can go look back at those companies if they're not aware of those as well. Just example is a JLL. So they're one of the topmost real estate consulting players in India. So I recently worked on a proposal, let's say for real estate. So we did interact with them. It was an interesting experience. So those are some examples. FTII is another one. They're more in the financial consulting space and restructuring, etc. So then you have Towers. What's in that's the one, right, for HR?
Yeah,
Abhishek? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So there are those which we don't hear of. You have Alvarez and Marshall, which is again a little more on the operation side. You have GEP, which is again on the operation side. So
Yeah. And a very famous HR consulting firm, Mercer. So Mercer
yeah.
is has been around for eons and eons of years. We don't tend to hear those names because they
Hmm.
tend to be more a very silent hirer on campuses.
Yeah.
But I think one must understand that consulting is a very broad spectrum. I mean, we wanted to introduce all of you to that, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Right.
okay, great. So we are seeing questions coming through the chat. We absolutely will take them. So let them coming through, and at the end of the section we'll take it. Um, I think two important things that we one must understand in consulting is there are two sets of projects, right? And why this is important to understand, because this gives you a very good view into everybody see, us typically as ex consultants or current consultants, what are the skill sets, what do I need to have, why should they hire me? They
Hmm.
need to hire you for only two purposes. Either there is an advisory project or an implementation project, right? So an advisory project is essentially when, which the MBBs are very famous for, where consulting companies are basically spending time to build a roadmap or build a strategy or build some kind of plan for a company, but with almost no need for execution yet. However, on the other side, there may be projects, and this is where, let's say, a Deloitte or Accenture and the other big fours and the other players sort of make their money, is implementing things. I can build technology for you. Let me take that strategy or plan somebody else built for you, or you built internally. Let me help you operationalize it. Let me help you launch into a new market. So implementation also, um, I just want to issue the clarification, does not mean IT all the time. Everybody thinks implementation projects in consulting are only IT related. There are a lot of operations and strategy projects which have to be implemented on the ground, right? And yes, technology does play a role, but not every implementation project, not every implementation project is an IT project. But the reverse
Yeah.
is true. Every implementation to a certain degree will have some kind of IT in it. So I think that's a uh,
Yeah.
key clarification required. Anything else, Pranav, you want to add on
Right.
this,
So I think
please?
this is a very important point, and I'll tell you personally, when I got to know about this distinction, I was at ISB and I was talking to a senior of mine, and I asked her that she was working in a consulting company. I said, these are the shortlists I have, and what is the preference I should take within these shortlisted consulting companies. And she said that there are different kinds of work each of them do. I said, for example, and this is basically the distinction she also explained to me. I remember clearly on call. And the point was that what we hear sometimes is like the strategy projects, and that is a part of the advisory thing which we do. But there is a lot of implementation work also. For example, I tell you for BCG as well, we do a lot of strategy projects which are under the advisory bracket, and then there are some implementation projects also which also happen. Typically, advisory projects are very short run, so you will have like a 3 month period or a 6 month period at max. But implementation are more long run, so you'll have either 6 month, 1 year. Sometimes when we work with the public sector and government, it extends to 2 to 3 year contracts as well. Sometimes when we work with public sector banks also, then again it's a slower transformation, so you take 2 to 3 years. Large IT organizations, we work with them. I won't name those companies, but we do long run implementation projects for them as well. And the idea is sometimes both of them go hand in hand also. For example, one of the projects which I did, which was a public sector one, we built all the core um, core strategy in 3 months. We completed the whole strategic thinking in another 3 months, and after that we had a clear roadmap for the next 2 years on how it will be implemented. Because initially you set out to define your goals, how you will do it, and you align with the client on it, and then after that it is all about implementing it with different mid-level managers, let's say, in the client organization. So I think it's a good distinction to be aware about, and you could read the example also. I was reading right now as we were talking about Deloitte, which is there in the implementation one. That's an interesting one. Abhishek, is this coming from your personal experience?
I think completely agree. In fact, I'll mention an example for you. So a very famous example which combines advisory plus implementation is when Accenture did Hotstar. So a lot of people don't know this. Um, Hotstar was the complete strategy was built out by Accenture strategy. Um, the implementation was done, the tech implementation, the app and everything was built by Accenture technology, and now Accenture provides the entire backend and all the and everything. So they worked entirely with Star Sports and Star India to actually build out that. And so imagine, in fact, if you remember, Hotstar was probably one of the earliest OTT apps and applications which had come in India,
Yeah.
and no other channel actually. In fact, the channels did not even see that as as an area. So that's a wonderful space where both sets of projects combine. And I think uh, the key thing that one must realize is that when you get hired, you definitely need to show um, skills on one area or the other. If you can show a set of skills which are on both sides, I think that's wonderful. And I
Mm.
think, and we'll talk about it as we get there later.
Yeah.
But I
So
think that would really be useful. Go ahead.
yeah, I just add one thing. I see this question from Bani in the chat, which is saying, what exactly is the role in implementation project? So I think completely depends on what goal are you solving for the client, right? For example, if you are on a cost cutting case for any industry, you will, let's say, have some amount of manpower cost reduction as your goals as well. And you will say that we can help save 50 crores, let's say, if we rationalize your manpower, be it in terms of organizational restructuring, be it in terms of letting go of some teams or letting go of the fat, so to say, or the excess at different layers in the organization. So manpower cost reduction is one example of it. And there are two parts to it, right? One, you can say that, okay, we've seen the entire industry, we've done a benchmarking, and your competitors are not spending so much on manpower, you're spending too much on manpower, you should reduce manpower. That is to some extent the strategy point of it. And you can say that, okay, at these levels we think you should let go of people. But when the client asks you that, okay, come on board, help me do it, and then we end up going through their employee records to help them identify, say, the low performers or those who are not really up to the mark where they need them, or those teams which are now redundant in the recent years. That is where you go into the implementation side of it. Sometimes people do say that it's getting your hands dirty also, but I think that is where a lot of value comes out. Like advisory and strategy is great, but implementation is where the client also feels that, okay, you are helping me through the journey, you're not just showing the path.
So I'll
Thank
move
you.
forward. Perfect.
Yeah.
Um, so there was a question from Shantanu who said, "I just got an opportunity as a marketing executive for a startup, and it's quite similar as consulting them for marketing." See, Shantanu, the difference per se in consulting is, um, in a consulting tenure of 2 to 3 years, you could end up playing different functional roles, also looking at different industries. I think that's where consulting is different from a regular corporate job, because in a regular corporate job, let's say the startup was around edtech, right? So over a period of 2 years, you will get very good functional experience on marketing, but your industry experience will probably limited to edtech, right? Uh, Whereas in consulting, what may happen as your career progresses, that people may ask you to move functionally, they may ask you to move on an industry basis, right? So I think that's something we need to look at. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison, because the difference also, when you do take up a role in a startup as a marketing executive, you actually have to do the marketing. Unlike in a consulting firm, depends on the engagement type. If you are in an advisory or strategy project or early implementation, you just have to help people do it, and they can go ahead. Um, so
Yeah,
Patrick has another question. Patrick, do you mind typing it down for us? Or
yeah. And while Patrick does that, I'll just pick up the next one, which was related to what I had said about manpower reduction.
hmm,
Um, I agree, Vivek. It's never the best answer, never the most liked answer in the room. And sometimes it is not the first answer itself. You need to think about more longer perspective. Employee motivation is definitely a factor, but you also need to look at whether it fits into your business processes or not, whether the industry has changed and are you lagging behind. So you try and do both. So it's not going to be that okay, just do cost cutting and do it by manpower reduction. You'll do a lot of other things. You'll do some digitization of processes. You'll save costs there. You will think about how can you improve the current um, say customer processes. How do you reduce the support costs of it? How do you reduce the customer return? So there are multiple ways of reducing cost, but that was just one example. And yeah, I think some organizations are very clear that they don't want to do it, even in times of today when COVID is there. And there are some organizations who are more open to it. So it's more of an organizational preference. Yeah, I think that should answer it. Abhishek, you want to pick the next question?
yeah,
Then we can start
I
with
think
this.
the next set of questions will get answered as we go into the slides. So yeah, if I can ask just people to hold on for 2 minutes, we'll actually go through that.
Yeah,
Um, right. So now comes the big question. There seems to be a sense of excitement. Is that okay? Great. You guys have been talking up consulting quite a bit, but what do the skills look like? I think here's the important thing. What we must understand and we must realize, what is it that consultants and consulting teams actually do. So let's walk you through the process. So what happens is, the first thing, a big skill that comes out in your consulting is relationship building. People don't realize this, and somehow this never makes it on job descriptions. But as a consultant, if you are not good at connecting with people and not good at communicating with people, I think you will never make a great consultant. So that's one of the first things that a lot of clients, consulting is a relationship business, right? It's a relationships can draw in crores and crores of return and recurring revenue, even times like COVID. So I think that's one skill set which comes into play. And one thing people also keep, I think, getting wrong is, they think that the relationship building skill should only be at the senior level, because those are the people who speak to the customer or the client. It's not true. Actually, the relationships are built all the way through. So if you have a set of smart consultants and analysts who, who have built great relationship on with their counterparts on the other side, that message also seeps up saying, these are good people, these are people we want to work with. They understand our viewpoint and they want to do good things for our company. I think the other next thing which comes into play in terms of skills is defining outcomes and scoping projects. I think this is where a lot of skills around detail orientation. I think a lot of people miss that. As a consultant, you need to be absolutely fantastic with detail orientation. You're you should be understanding details and attention to details, and have a very strong analytical mind, I think. And a strong analytical mind does not mean you score great on a catch score, or you have very high IQ. You'll be surprised, you can find uh, people who do general trading, or a shopkeeper working on the road, or or pushcart vendor, or even a policeman. If you ask a traffic policeman, some of them are really, really sharp. They can catch people. They can analyze things very quickly. So analytical thinking doesn't have to come out of great big IQ scores, right? Um, I think the next thing is what consulting companies do is send teams out to the clients, and this is where the next skill comes into play, which is working in teams. Uh, Something people have to understand: if you are very good at as an individual contributor, right? What I would suggest heavily to you is look at roles in IT, look at roles in tech, where you don't have to necessarily work with large teams. But if you are good at working in teams, that's where consulting will really, really help you, right?
Yeah.
Let's move next. Uh, Plans, making project plans. I think a technical skill that I'll highlight to a lot of you, and again, this gets missed, is project management. A lot of people don't realize project management is an actual skill. In fact, there is a PMP certification, and I know it sounds more operational, but that's as a consultant, if you're very good at project management, understanding risks in a project, I think that's a very strong technical skill to have. Gathering and putting data, analysis, communicating results and recommendations. I think, uh, Pranav, do you want to sort of share your opinion in terms of
Yeah.
um, how does a consultant's time space out in these
Right.
different activities?
Um, Again, I think it's very interesting the way you laid it out. These are actually all the things which consultants, I think, experience almost across the board, whether they are at an associate, senior associate consultant level, or whether they're at a PL principal level where they're more into managing projects, or if it is at a partner, senior partner level where it is more client relationship or getting the client on board. So I think each of us at different levels does experience this. Um, so I think I agree with the point when you were saying that engaging with the clients for new work, for repeat work, all of that is very important. Um, then the other thing about sending teams. So I'll just add one point there is not only is it that you identify 4 or 5 people and just send them to a client to do the job, you need to internally scout the right kind of people with not just the right kind of work experience in that industry. For example, if I'm doing an education project, I would want 1 or 2 people who understand education, 2, 3 people who bring a fresh perspective. And even within the team, you want 1 or 2 people who are more technically sound, you want 1 or 2 people who are more client friendly, and that's how you divide the work within the project also. If you have multiple modules, that's how you end up dividing it. So for a manager, that's very important thing. um, and yeah, I think one thing I'll also say is that sometimes these steps are not in a row. So these actually happen sometimes in parallel, or you will move on in this trajectory and then come back to one point. So in long run cases, you'll sometimes feel that you initially define the outcome and then you come back to redefine the goals again because something changed. So that is how it is, that these uh, steps are not in a order. Sometimes you come back to these steps at different points in time. And just one more thing, I was actually reading on LinkedIn that somebody had posted, and they were from McKinsey, ex McKinsey, who's a founder now of some startup. Somebody had said that how important EQ was for them, and it can be simply getting data from a client also requires an effort, and they will not give it that easily to you unless you convince them for it or they see value in it, and you really need to work with them. Sometimes we see, and I've seen this in projects, and consultants go wrong. There is, they walk in, they feel that okay, we will align with the top management, we'll just execute the project, we will go demand things, we will get it right there. It just doesn't work that way. That's how you start breaking relations, and it gets harder to earn back that trust at that point. So across levels, working with people, understanding people, giving them what they want, and then getting something out of them. So that's the way I think of it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pranav. I
Yeah.
think, sorry, apologies if there's some background noise. I have a 1.5-year-old daughter in the house, so it's a weekend. As much as I try to keep her quiet, she wants to talk about everything in life.
Mhm.
Apologize for that. I think there's a question around project management and analysis, and sort of trying to understand that from a clarity standpoint. I think why project management is very critical, because when consulting projects are set up, they're set up with very clear timelines and objectives. And I think it's the biggest thing for a consultant to do is to identify potential risks to the delivery timeline and the quality of delivery. Both things are essentially where project management comes into play. So you have to manage time, you have to obviously manage the resources and everything, but you have to manage time. You have, if the project is slipping or deliverables are slipping, you have to let the customer know, or if you're going to go well ahead of time also, and if other things can also be added in. The second thing is the quality. If you at any point of time believe the quality is suffering because lack of data, or something changed, or the market changed, or the expectations changed, I think that's another key piece of the project management angle. I think the analytics or the analysis part of any consulting project, I'm coming from my own experiences. A lot of time, the companies are bringing in consultants because they have a lot of data, they have done a lot of initial work, but they don't know how to make sense out of it, right? And what they believe is, instead of my person who has a 10-hour day, if they spend 1 hour on every day trying to solve this, can I get someone who spends 10 or 12 hours a day to solve this all the time? So it's a make versus buy decision. Can I do this consulting work internally, or do I get somebody else to come and do it? And essentially that's where the analysis piece comes into play. It's where companies are asking you to take a lot of this data, a lot of this information, and try to make sense out of it. And I think this is where uh, pure problem solving as a skill also comes. Again, let me explain. Problem solving does not mean solving great mathematical problems or scoring very high on your quant on CAT or IQ test. Problem solving is genuine problem solving, right? Which people do is like, okay, I mean, there is a lockdown in Delhi. I need something transferred from Delhi to Gurgaon. How do I make it happen, right? And how can I do it legally and illegally, both require tremendous amount of real world problem solving. I think that's again a skill which is not very well marketed also, I think, by consulting companies, uh, because a lot of problem solving becomes very academic problem solving, solving cases and all that. But I think if you can bring that real world problem solving flavor. I remember when I used to hire at Accenture, we used to love a candidate who comes in and gives a completely unorthodox answer, right? And the answer worked, and that person would really shine through for us. So, anything you want to add on that,
Mm.
Pranav?
Yeah, so I just pick up. So I firstly definitely agree with the fact that problem solving is not just what you see in case studies. Those are actually business case studies and very typically categorized. Never will you experience a case which can be easily categorized as one of those case types, etc. And there are different layers which are involved in problem solving. There is a people angle to it, not just that theoretically it works, but practically does it work or not. That's one thing. The second thing is, somebody asked about data analysis and data consulting. So I think that is definitely a space which is growing right now. It's been growing for a couple of years, so it's not a very recent phenomena. It's been probably growing last 5-10 years. um, and I think it's growing well, not just for Indian players to cater to Indian market, but also to cater to the global market. um, so I can give you an example. Say BCG has a separate team called Gamma, and what they do is Gamma is more on completely focused on data analytics, etc. And we hire separately for that team, and it doesn't require an MBA. It's more about whether you can do data analytics or not. um, and we have special softwares, etc. for that. That's one example. Second is AT Kearney. They do a lot of retail oriented analytics. Third is GEP. I believe they do a lot of ops analytics. Yeah, Decision Point is actually company of one of my friends who is from IIT Madras. He's been running it last 10 years, based out of Gurgaon only. And they've been growing very well. They cater not just to India, but multiple other countries. And there, what tends to happen is they do a lot of consumer sales analytics. They, let's say, work with Coca-Cola, Johnson and Johnson, the big FMCGs, get their data and then make sense out of it. And yeah, I do agree with the point when somebody said that collection and organization of data with Indian players is not at the right space right now. It is true. Maybe the newer companies are able to do a better job. You go ask Flipkart about their data, they will have it ready. But if you go and ask earlier player, maybe JSW Steel, they will take a lot of time to come back to you with the data. So that is a work in progress. Um, yeah, so I think that covers that part. There's a quick question which came up after that, which is how to upskill data analytics skills, any certification recommendations or project. So I don't know too much about projects, honestly. Certifications, um, I think there are a bunch which are available, and maybe post the session they can even share it, and that will help others also. But I feel that Upgrad has been offering a lot of good courses on analytics. That's been one of their key focus areas from the word go. And actually, the Upgrad founder is also from ISB, Mayank Kumar, and he'd come on campus. So he gave us this talk, and in that he mentioned that how data analytics was their biggest selling product, so to say. Now they're diversifying and they've got more online diplomas, degrees, etc. But analytics is something which is very strong with them.
Yes, one thing I want to add around certification and courses and all that. So somebody mentioned the KPMG certification for Six Sigma and the, like let's say upgrade and all that, and let's say financial modeling. My only, and with all due respect to all these platforms and people who build the content, um, one of the things that I've always found that it's a little bit challenging with all these platforms is the experiential learning component is low. So whenever you pick any of these online courses or certifications, see if there is an experiential learning component that you can actually do a live project with the company or actually apply it somewhere else. Because one of the biggest things I've realized over a period of time, when I would probe anybody on their certifications, uh, they could not even explain the basics. Because one of the challenges with e-learning can be sometimes is that you can just quickly go through the courses and game the system and get the certification, but have you learned it? Have you learned it well enough to actually go and apply it? I think that's a key thing. So whatever, regardless of whatever certification you do, uh, the brands actually don't matter so much, because please also understand, online learning is a very new space. So does a Yun Academy versus a upgrad versus something else and all that, do these different brands matter? Not really. But how do you, can you use that certification to actually solve a problem for the company that you're going to, consulting or otherwise? I think that is more important. I think a lot of people get hung up around that. There was a question around, where do I get my PMP certification from? There is an institute called PMI, Project Management Institute. It's where all the project managers in India get their certification. So you can just go to their website. We'll share that as well along the way
Yeah.
for you. Uh, yeah, so I think I agree. A lot of people do post it only on LinkedIn to sort of just create a highlight, or but I think the bigger thing is, can you post a project that you did and maybe a 5 slide deck around that on LinkedIn, and then you can always say, I did this certification and that's how this is the outcome of something like that. I think that would be a lot better thing. I think
Yeah.
it's a
No, no, I
really good
completely
point.
agree. So more than the certification, what you should be doing is a post, even if you want to signal to potential recruiters saying that, okay, this is something I learned and I did this course. you could do one out of two things. One thing is definitely do some project work to say that, okay, this is the application of what I learned and I actually get what I was taught. The second thing is, if you don't want to go that far, you just want to share it, just share like a snippet of your learnings from it. And then you're just helping the community also. So it won't seem as much of bragging as much as knowledge sharing. So that is one thing you could take care of.
Okay. So I think let's move ahead.
Yeah.
Um, Still have quite a bit of material to cover. So
Yes.
here's the a very interesting slide. I think a lot of people will like it rather than a slightly older person like me talk and a much more dynamic person than Pranav talk. Is what's the progression? So typically, if you are an undergraduate or have no experience, a fresher, you will start at the basic position in consulting, which is the analyst position. Uh, and how do you get into that? There is academic success that they look at, some kind of consulting fit. Again, problem solving EQ. I think EQ is a big thing, emotional quotient,
Yes.
emotional intelligence. Uh, some essence of initiative taking. Um, uh, I think business acumen, uh, which I would put it in Hindi and say understanding of dhanda. If you don't get that, if you don't demonstrate that business sense, I think now consulting companies are also evolving, where they're also looking at people who can very quickly become specialists. Because earlier consulting companies would focus only on generalists for a very long period of time. So they're looking at people who understand the rhythm of different industries and functions. I said teamwork, obviously, presentation skills. Then you move into what would be a business analyst or a role or a consultant role. Obviously, all these titles are very different at different companies. We try to aggregate it. Typically, this is where you would enter if you are a fresher with an MBA. So you just sort of have, let's say, one step ahead of the ladder. Uh, it takes about 3 to 4 years, sometimes even faster, for people to go from, let's say, analyst consultant to a, let's say, engagement manager level, which is where you will be leading a small team, either a small part of the project or a, an entire project, which is fairly decently sized. Um, After that, you sort of get into slightly more senior role where you may be leading much larger projects with multiple teams, uh, sometimes work across geographies. This is also called senior associate principal, or sometimes also called senior manager. It depends on different companies nomenclature. It's actually very interchangeable. And then you can sort of get to a principal role, which is also called senior manager, where now you are moving away from actually delivering on projects to maintaining relationships, having chats with the CXOs and the executives and the business unit heads, trying to talk to them about new projects and new things that you can do. And then from there, which is probably the most coveted position in consulting, which is true with the big four a lot, because there is the partnership angle there or model. But even in the other consulting firms, the partner, senior partner, and it takes a decent amount of time to get there. However, if you compare it to other industries, this is still a faster rise to the probably highest level. So
Yeah.
this journey can adjust itself. Some people get to senior partner in 12 years also. I've known them at Accenture. Some people take close to 20 years also. So this is a very sort of a elastic kind of setup. But I think these would be the, on an aggregate, the right levels in a consulting world. Sorry, Pranav.
Okay. No, no, I completely agree. This is a good way to show the career progression. This is how we typically see it even at BCG. And of course, the titles vary across different organizations, whether it's the Big Four or MBB as well. But yeah, this is mostly the journey. I think a lot of people who are attending this call, they're starting with their career. So they're looking at either step one, step two. So I'll talk a little about that. The questions which were definitely asked and are maybe relevant also for a lot more other people is saying that what are they specifically looking about, what about spikes, etc. um, yeah, so I'll just first answer that question. We do hear about spikes, especially when we talk about MBB. um, if I was to be brutally honest, they do consider it, but I won't say that that is the only factor. That's one thing. Second thing is, spikes could be in anything. It could be your work experience, it could be your academic experience, your academic achievements, or it could be your extracurricular achievements. So they're looking for one out of those three, if not two out of those three. So at least one out of three needs to stand out for them. So that is how they will be looking at it. So it's not necessary that I have to be a national level swimmer to be working at BCG. If I am, that's probably one of my spikes in extracurriculars. But is that what they will hire me for? My answer is no. They are essentially looking for the things which Abhishek mentioned, that you need to be a good person to have in your team. So that's where your emotional quotient, your ability to work in a team comes in. And of course, you have the problem solving, structured thinking, a lot of that. And then you have the business acumen angle as well. So it's a mix of all of these things. Nobody has all of them at like the highest level. I may say that I am probably slightly lower on one thing, say business acumen, but higher on EQ, so I compensate for it. So that is how I would think of it. And yeah, there are other questions which are now popping up. So there's one question which says, can an MBA grad with pre 2 years experience join as engagement manager? Um, I think it does vary a lot from situation to situation. Unlikely that they will take somebody with 2 years experience directly at an engagement manager level, even after an MBA. They will probably put you first at a consultant level and then see you grow into a engagement manager level. So that is one. There was one other question which somebody had asked, saying that if I have, let's say, a certification or prior work ex in say project management or operations, will I get those kind of roles? Um, my answer is that at least for MBB, I can say, first off, you will not get those roles probably. Um, at least that's not the decision criteria. By luck, you may be put on those cases, but typically they will try and give you a diverse experience, and they'll probably push you into different industries as well. So if somebody is coming from retail, the other day I was talking to a friend of mine who's from ISB working at BCG. He's a consultant now. His prior experience was all retail and uh, like retail market experience for fashion brands per se. But now he's been put only on industrial goods cases, which are more manufacturing cases. So it's not necessary that you will get the same experience which you had before. Um,
So I'll
yeah,
I'll add I'll
yeah.
add something to that, Pranav. On the other hand, an Accenture would do the reverse. So if you have very strong experience, because Accenture prides on industry knowledge. So if somebody has worked, in fact, over a period of time, a lot of people have been disenchanted with some companies like Accenture or Deloitte, because a lot of the younger folks applied and didn't get through, and people with 4 or 5 heavy experience in steel plants or in manufacturing or utilities or power or oil and gas got hired, because they need to send somebody to Saudi Arabia. And guess what? They want to send somebody to an oil field, and they want somebody from that area. So I think it's a mixed bag. It's if look very carefully on the job description, um, especially if they start mentioning some of the teams that you may be part of, and if there's a strong functional or industry specific teams, then I think it may be useful to actually demonstrate skills there. It just sort of increase your chances. um, and for someone like me who was a senior manager at Accenture, I think with 2 years of experience prior to MBA, I think engagement manager is a tough battle. Most consulting firms want to first test the waters with people before they put them in leadership positions. Um, and I'll tell you why. The reason is, for the longest time, initially consulting firms hired from the IITs and the IIMs and very bright people, But the biggest challenge that they had is they had very bright people, but they did not know whether they had the best EQ skills. So consulting companies by nature have built this in a memory muscle that let's first check the individual contribution level of this person, their ability to do work with the team. Only then will we give them the uh, a project where they are managing a team, um, because that's requires very different skill sets which are not hard skill sets. It's not math based skill sets. These are soft skills, if you want to call them. um, I think there are again questions
Yeah.
around the application piece. I think um, biggest thing I would say, a lot of people are asking about skills, and I think the skills we've talked about multiple times, is think of it this way. Um, Pick a particular problem which is happening. So, for example, uh, let's take Make My Trip, for example. Make My Trip's business is basically stopped overnight, right? Uh, Basically, nobody wants to go to Make My Trips website. What will you do there? Except if you have to book somebody's ticket traveling from here or there or whatever. So what do you do next now? How how will a player like Make My Trip uh, completely revamp its strategy and operations to survive something like COVID? If you can create a mini project, an approach around that, and get it validated by someone in that sector, I think you will learn more skills around consulting than any other course or anything that you would do. Yes, business school is a tag that is required and all that, but I think if you can run yourself through that exercise, and guess what, you should post it on LinkedIn if you can. I think that's where you will also understand what it takes to be a consultant. If you were a consultant to Make My Trip, they hired you right now, I don't know if they can pay you, but if they promise to pay you, if you did a good job and said, please tell me what do I do next, and if you can answer that uh, in a very good way, and if somebody from the industry can ratify that for you, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Sorry, I'll just take one more question, Pranav, if
yeah.
you don't mind. There are a lot of questions. Oh, I'm in an average business school, not a great business school. I feel that I won't be able to join. I'll be very honest. I've seen people from business school names that I've never heard actually make it fairly big in consulting. Uh, Maybe not the MBBs of the world, but other consulting firms. I think there are many routes to consulting. Um, Not always the best route, by the way, is the entry level. A lot of people believe that the best route to consulting is entry level. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there are many routes to consulting, and I have seen people's careers slow down excessively if they came in as an entry level consultant, an analyst, but didn't pick up the right skills, didn't get the right projects, and stagnate in the system. And I've seen people who've come from outside and basically get two double promotions because they were so talented and they had so much skills, uh, both functional and domain and technical, that the company believed they actually had underhired them. So I think that's a key thing to consider.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Pranav.
Right. So I completely agree with you on that, that there are multiple routes to it, and B school is just one option. Let's think of it this way, right? There are a lot of people who join laterally. So maybe you start off with Deloitte or Accenture, either of those, or any KPMG, PwC, etc. And then after a couple of years, spend 5 6 years there, and then you can transition to a MBB if that is something you're particularly keen on. That is one way. The second way is that you become industry expert, say oil and natural gas expert, do it for 5 6 years, 7 8 years, and then you come at a very senior position in a consulting company, because oil and natural gas is something which is a strong portfolio across MBB, at least from what I can say, mostly for McKinsey and BCG, I'd say. The other thing to consider is that there's another question, sorry, which distracted me. So my point is there are multiple ways to get there. So don't worry about whether B school is the only opportunity for you or not. Yep.
I think I don't know if there are people with undergraduate backgrounds. A lot of consulting companies are also looking at undergraduates because they are uh, uh, um, let's say, if I don't want to use the word, but they are more cost effective compared to MBAs. I didn't want
Right.
to use the word cheaper. They are more cost effective. They would probably work longer hours. They have less of an ego, um, and they're equally smart also, right? And especially if I get a BBA, their understanding of business is almost at par of an MBA, probably a little less, but maybe not. So I think there are multiple options. You can enter at the undergraduate level. You can enter laterally. I mean, I've seen the movement either ways. People going from, mid-tier consulting, if you want to call it, to top-tier consulting, and also the reverse. People coming from an MBB going into an Accenture and Deloitte, where they get a higher position. So I think you will definitely see that. I think there's a question around freelance consultants specific to retail, FMCG, hospitality. I think freelance consultants are starting to make a niche. Uh, there are a lot of smaller consulting one name which comes to mind in the retail space is a company called Technopack, right? It became very famous in the retail space because all the work they did. So um, I think just freelancing may not work in the longer term. Maybe you can get a few projects here and there, but I think over a period of time, any freelance consultant, especially if you're looking at retail, FMCG, hospitality, would want to look at it from a firm. Can I create a small venture or a startup around it? And I actually believe, and basically, if you can also create some kind of, let's say, two-sided platform, though there is no solid model which exists today of a two-sided, like an Amazon of consulting services for, let's say, these two or three areas, FMCG or hospitality, whatever. I think that could be also a big white space because companies are now looking for very specific things to be solved at very cost-effective prices, and regardless of how much consulting companies rationalize, they come up with a very significant premium, right? Because at the end they still have to pay people's salaries, right? And whatnot. So yeah, I think that's something there for sure.
Yeah.
um
Right. I think one thing is that we'll probably run through some questions right now and come back to them at the end of the session in the
yeah,
interest of the time
yeah,
and with
let's do that.
content. Yeah, because we have
Okay.
30 minutes to go as per the slot.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Pranav. Thank you for
Yeah. Yeah.
keeping us honest. I think here's an important thing. There are a lot of questions around, oh, I want to get into consulting and everything, but let's give you a little bit of a warning, right? There is a lot that is happening right now, and I think Pranav will talk about it as well, and I'll chip in. So go
Right.
ahead, Pranav.
Yeah. So you did the nice part, I do the gloomy part, but um, it's actually fine. I think consulting is one of the industries which is relatively stable compared to certain other industries, say hospitality, travel, etc., which have been hit really hard. Um, so, giving an overview over here, we're talking about management consulting, audit advisory, and niche financial consulting as well. So, what's happening and what's written at the bottom is, so we've given a color code over there, green, yellow, and or red. You can figure out that green is saying that they're doing well on those fronts, red is saying that they've suffered on those fronts. Um, so the new focus areas emerging, which I've written over here, are for management consultants, let's say for MBB, is a lot more around turnaround, recovery, figuring out how do you go back to business as usual, COVID. So that was the first 3 months focus. Then slowly they're going back to saying that, okay, now that businesses come back to normal, processes are happening, then you're asking that, what can I do for, say, uh, digitizing processes, because not so much physical interaction is possible. So that is the other thing which is happening. What has gone down is actually more strategy work, I would say, because businesses are more in like survival revival mode and not as much in strategy thinking mode. But I think that will come back soon as well. As far as audit advisory consulting companies, the big four are concerned, what I see is a lot of audit work has increased for them. A lot of work around cyber security, tech capability audits, etc., has increased because the threat of cyber issues has also become more real with the digital world in COVID. As far as the financial consulting ones are concerned, so like I was mentioning, FTI, etc., Alvarez and Marshall does a lot of financial consulting as well. Um, there are others also. The point over there is they're focusing a lot more on restructuring organizations, M&A deals happening, because this is also an opportunity which is a good time for M&As to happen. So that is where they're seeing a lot of their money coming in. um, I think in India, bankruptcy has gone down because of the recent change which was introduced by the finance ministry, saying that no bankruptcy filing will happen for the next 6 months to a year. That is one place where bankruptcy for India has gone down, but globally bankruptcy has gone up because of COVID. So FTI, let's say, I know does a lot of legal work and due diligence around what is the payments to be done in case of bankruptcy and how do you ensure court settlements, arbitrations. A lot of that kind of work is also under financial consulting. That business has gone up. The other thing which I had written on the left in a box is around trending, right? So um, the point over there is a lot of government work which has started coming in. So I can speak for MBBs, and I know some big four such as EY do a lot of government and um, that kind of public sector work. So that has gone up. A lot of industry bodies are actually stepping up their game to understand what will change the game for their industry. In terms of a post-COVID scenario. Everybody's talking about the new normal. What does it mean for their industry? And if the industry as a whole has suffered or has changed, what needs to be done? And yeah, so pro bono cases were happening. I think that happened more in the first 3 months, and it's still happening a little, but it's going to phase out soon because you need money rolling in. So that is going to be that. And yes, it's more short duration cases, and this is also a time where companies are actually building relationships for potential clients. So you invest 3 months of your team's time to actually show that you can deliver value, help the company in their COVID transition, and then you potentially pitch to them that, okay, let's do a 6 month project and we will help you out of this. So yeah.
I think a couple of things. Thank you, Pranav. I think really a very in-depth way of showing that. I think a couple of things I'll highlight here. I think because I remember at Accenture, this was a asset or an area we had developed long back called business continuity management. It was initially taken very lightly by most companies because nobody thought you would have a situation like COVID, and now suddenly it's top of everybody's mind. What if I have a large facility? Let's say, think of an Infosys sitting in Mysore or Pune, those 20,000, 30,000 campuses. There's a massive earthquake there, or something happens, or your operation cease. What do you do next? Or so I think that's one piece which will come. A couple of things which are not on the slide. Actually, we should have mentioned it. Is I think there is going to be a lot of operations work, just like after GST, a lot of operations happened. So it's very interesting. Prior to GST, companies had very distributed operations across India and distribution centers and warehouses and all that to take advantage of the tax arbitrage, state tax arbitrage. Because let's say Karnataka or Bangalore had a 5% billing versus, let's say, somewhere else the VAT was a lot higher. So after GST, basically everybody said, "Oh, great! Now this is wonderful. I don't need to keep my material all over the country. I keep it in dedicated warehouses." Now, in a scenario where you go lockdown, 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 unlock, lockdown, lockdown, unlock, lockdown, which will happen, like UP is now basically in 3-day lockdown. Do you want a scenario where you have distribution centers centralized? you may want to decentralize a lot of your operations because uh, let's say I'm a company with heavy operations, let's say a big e-com player, and I have operations in NCR. Should I have distribution centers for each city, or should I take the risk of centralizing it somewhere in Delhi or Noida or somewhere in the middle of Ghaziabad where it's really cheap, or maybe Faridabad somewhere, right? So it has to. I think that is another place where a lot of work will start to come, where companies will look very extensively on their supply chain and say, can we take away these kind of pandemic or lockdown risks? Because we will continue to be in lockdown unlock sort of phases for a while, especially companies which have very heavy product base. So I think that's something which would be very interesting. Um,
Yep.
okay, so let's keep
Mm.
going. I'll come
Because
back
we'll
to
cover
the.
about skills soon. Yeah,
Yes, I see a lot of. So Pranav, can you go ahead? Just to
sure.
close. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you see on this slide is more around management consulting. We'll probably talk about the big four on the next slide as well to some extent. Here, so we initially spoke about what has changed in terms of the kind of projects and clients they're getting. Business wise, what has changed? Here are some points on that. So the what happens is that your current year targets, they define the bonus at the end of the year, because the targets have gone for a toss, because business would have suffered, and this is across consulting. The bonuses at the end of the year are going to be affected. Your promotions are tied to the next year achievements which you will have, and that is the reason the promotions will also suffer or slow down. The degree of impact varies from company to company and varies from type of company to type of company. So in management consulting, maybe it's slightly lesser. As you go towards advisory, it's slightly more. The other thing mentioned over here is the fixed fee to success based. So what tends to happen when you need to price a project, either you can say that, okay, I have 5 resources, I will charge you 10 crores and this will be a 6 month engagement. And they say, okay, we'll pay you this amount and we'll probably spread it into tranches of say quarterly installments. That is the fixed fee model. But in recent years, what has started evolving is a more variable based model, which is a success based model, where they say not only are we paying you for your services, but we are paying you to achieve a target. And the ability to achieve that outcome is the success. And if we see that you are achieving that target for us, we will pay you accordingly. So a lot more success based cases are coming. Earlier, it used to be that fixed fee was 90% of cases, I think. Now it's come to more around fixed fee is down to 60% and success based has increased. Yeah. So that was on the left hand side. I'll quickly cover the right hand side and I'll let Abhishek add to it. So um, offshore consulting has been definitely impacted. So I know a bunch of friends from ISB who are working with Deloitte USI. So what tends to happen with Deloitte is they have a Deloitte India team and they have a Deloitte USI team, and both are consulting arms. Both of them would do a lot of tech work per se. So Deloitte USI is catering to the US economy or the US clients which they have, which are the offshore clients. US economy had already been experiencing like a slowdown pre-COVID. Now it just got amplified in the post-COVID world. So that's where offshore consulting services have been like experiencing a double whammy of sorts. Coming to the point around payment cycles, this is again something I'm hearing across different consulting types, that they have eased out on the payment terms. That's one way of giving some concession to your clients, saying that okay, if you can't do it within 30-day cycle, take 60 or 90 days. We are understanding about it. That changes the cash flow for the consulting company. The risk consulting and tech implementation are rising. I think that's something we've already spoken about, so I won't go too much in detail of that. But one question which comes is, what do you mean by digitization of processes? Basically, you're talking around automation and how much can you help in cost saving over there. A simple task as, let's say, invoice processing. Earlier, if you had 10 people manually processing your invoices for the full year, can I get a software which reduces the requirement of from 10 people to 2 people, and I will gain out of that. Last point is around strategy and cost takeout projects. Again, something I mentioned earlier. even the large companies are looking at cost savings at this point, because they know that they're not going to experience the same growth as in the usual financial year. So cost takeout is definitely the top concern for every company across all industries. Strategy comes in second, um, in terms of growth strategy, I would say, or entering a new market or entering a new line of business. That's the second focus. Yeah.
I think a key thing that we want to sort of summarize on this, I did mention work coming in on the demand side around e-commerce. Uh, some M&A activity may pick up because a lot of companies are now up for grabs for very limited amounts. And I think this is a quick thing. What we haven't seen in COVID yet is the full impact, financial impact of COVID. Uh, there is cash flow cycles which are about 6 months out, which will when hit the industry will also hit consulting a lot. And it is only after that that I
Yeah.
think, at least personally, I believe consulting will have a real upswing, because a lot of companies will then get funded again and get money again. So what you don't know right now is a lot of payments are stuck, and 6 months later when people start reneging on their payments, that will create another cash flow cycle, failure cycle. And I think that's a key point that we must understand. On the left hand side, especially the big four, there has been serious rationalization on salary, on payouts, on increments, where they have spread it through the years. So I think be very careful, even if a lot of you, let's say, going to the MBA 2 years from now, consulting may be a good option, but there may be other options on the table as well. So I don't think consulting is a straight pass through as it was, let's say, earlier, maybe pre-COVID. So one must, I think, take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. Um, I think before we, and I know there are a lot of questions around the skill piece, we'll come to that. I think let's just complete this piece, Pranav, especially
Yeah.
around consulting as an employer. And for all of you who are looking to apply in this cycle or the next, how will things look like? Go ahead, Pranav.
Okay. So I think again, this is more for management consulting. I can talk. Um, And what you see over there is that laterals are completely in the red. And we also had some temporary consultants we used to hire on a project basis. I think that has been shut for now. What's going to change is that maybe next year the situation improves and we'll have some of that going, but the numbers will not be back to pre-COVID anytime soon. I think undergraduates and postgraduates are in a better shape, which is why it's yellow and then turning to green. Um, Whatever offers, whether in terms of internship PPOs are there or in terms of full-time roles which were offered on campus, I think MBBs and to a large extent even the big four are actually sticking their necks out and following through on those um, offers which they had made. In terms of the left hand side, you see that it's stable in the short run in terms of compensation and promotions, but yeah, it has suffered a little. Um, that is that side. I think numbers wise, there will be smaller numbers if we talk about this year, this financial year of 2021. Any kind of hiring which will happen, there will be hiring at B schools and even undergrad campuses, but those will be smaller numbers. It's hard to predict the exact numbers, but that will be one thing. The other thing is that they will be looking more at possibly data analytics skills, digital tech capabilities, and that's just been a trend last couple of years, 3 to 5 years, I'd say, that even consulting companies are actually increasing their strength on these aspects. I think one of the questions which were shared earlier in Excel also was that how useful is analytics? I think it's definitely an advantage if you're talking about consulting companies, because a lot of work is data driven and analytics is what you do on the data. So if you're actually saying that you will give a data driven strategy, you need the analytics for it. And if somebody says that, okay, not only will I do the problem solving, but I'm decently good with analytics, that's the kind of mindset you want in the room. And that is across industries, across the type of project. So analytics and any kind of digital capabilities is a good thing to have. You will not be expected to code, I will clarify. Coding is, I think, still a far short in consulting. Personally, I can say for BCG, they've built a separate team, which I was mentioning earlier, called Gamma. They have a Platinum team also, which is focusing more on the tech transformation, product support, etc. So that is how that is. And the other thing is emotional quotient. Like Abhishek was saying, it's a very important angle. I think the whole remote working scenario has just increased that further. It's very difficult to build trust with somebody remotely. Um, it's a new experience for them. It's a new experience for us. So I think if you have a very high IQ and it shows through, I think it's a very good thing. They will appreciate that definitely.
I'll answer some questions coming
Yeah,
through. Thank you so much, Pranav.
yeah,
Around how do we, how do we apply for all these roles, especially if there is a challenge with on-campus placements being impacted. I mean, let's be honest. I think they will be. There is no two
yeah,
ways around that. I think here's a small tip to people. I think there is an off-campus route, right? I actually got hired into Accenture off campus, not on campus, because they were opening the sustainability practice in the country. I had a very deep sustainability background. I would have never gotten picked on the on campus profiles. In fact, I'd never applied through on campus. I got through no to somebody, and I actually put my CV in, and then some a recruiter called me back. So I think it's something we've been telling a lot of students and young professionals. Look at LinkedIn. There are a lot of um, HR managers, recruitment specialists who are posting roles even for consulting firms, right? And I think you need to keep your eyes peeled out for it, and 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 then apply there. And you can even connect. This doesn't stop, especially for roles that you may see on their jobs and career website, which they're not going to come and hire for in a campus. I know there are always policies on placement policies, but I think one thing any placement committee will never have a problem with is if that role was never supposed to come on campus, it's okay for you to reach out to the company also. Um, Obviously, figure it out with whatever authority. If you're a lateral, then obviously there is no challenges. You can do whatever you feel like. But I think there is a massive opportunity on the off-campus route, um, where you could look at this. There are many other opportunities. A lot of these consulting companies are running many competitions on, let's say, websites like, let's say, for example, even Dare to Compete, or in general, they're posting it on their website or um, on LinkedIn. I think you can be part of those sort of hackathon type competitions, because that is also a great place for them to build a pool of talent that they can potentially hire from. So I think look at opportunities there, and especially if you're looking for an internship, and if you see one of your connections in LinkedIn, who's a connection to, let's say, a senior consultant or a manager in a consulting firm, I don't think it hurts to actually ask for an introduction, and see if you can pitch an interesting idea to them. I think one thing that people get wrong with LinkedIn, they just think, uh, here's my CV, please hire me. I am looking for jobs. That's not going to cut it. I don't know why people think that just writing that would suddenly mean that people will find you very attractive and they want to hire you. It's pretty bad, actually. It leaves a very bad taste in the mouth, and it's very unprofessional also. I think one of the things, whenever it's a give and take, right? It's a social network. So when you're asking somebody, okay, consider me for roles at your place or whatnot, um, then what are you offering them? You can't offer them a resume and a set of skills. Give them an idea. Talk about their business. Talk about a recent project, let's say, that came out in the newspaper that they worked on. If you have an opinion around that, I mean, you have to show your business acumen, your learn, like, you have to show your an analytical side. You can't just be demanding a job. I, it's a personal pet peeve of mine that people just believe because they have a some kind of IM or IIT degree or whatnot, and that they have a free pass to just message people and say, "Give me a job." I'm looking for a job. I can add great value to your company. What value can you add? right? And it cannot be sentences. Pitch me an idea. Yeah, send me and this is to, let's say, consulting firms or startups or wherever, right? Uh, Put an idea together for them, and that's where people get very excited, because right now what the industry is looking for, especially consulting, is smart people that I can, who have a great idea, or who understand my services or my projects so well that they can, even sitting outside, they can give me an opinion on their business. I think that is something which is very valuable, and I think a lot of young people and students and young professionals miss, right? Because unfortunately in India we carry this big chip on the shoulder because we have great educational pedigree. Educational pedigree will only get you so much in life, and yeah, I think I've seen far more people fail with great education pedigree than the other way around. So yeah,
No.
right.
Yep.
So I think wonderful, great. So let's.
Yep.
You want to just quickly close out here, Pranav, in terms of the
Yep.
MBA as a route to consulting, and then we'll
So I
take the
think,
final set of
yeah,
questions.
I just feel that MBA is still a very valid route to consulting. It's not changing drastically anytime soon. I can speak for India system where you're talking about, say, management consulting. MBB is going to ISB, IMS, FMS, SPGen, all of them. um, that route's going to stay, and that's going to form like a good chunk of supply for these companies. So that's going to be that. As far as MBAs within India or outside India is concerned, I think doing an MBA outside India, say in America, is becoming harder by the day. So that is definitely a problem. Maybe definitely not this year or the year even after that. If you think beyond 1 or 2 year horizon, things might change for an MBA. Given what's on the slide, I see that you're talking about MBA as a cushion right now in the chaos. I think it's a good idea if you are, say, switching to consulting and you want to complete your education in this time when the economy is on a slowdown. That could be an interesting thing to be doing. Um, yeah, and that's basically how I look at MBA. I think a lot of people were asking about how else can we apply to these companies, and Abhishek explained that maybe LinkedIn could be one answer, or connecting with the HR managers, or just reaching out is one answer. The other answer is also to look at their company websites, right? They always update opportunities, roles there. So definitely keep a check on that. IM Jobs is another portal. You can keep a check over there. The one other thing I'd say is, and this is one thing I realized after joining DCG. So there are other services like a DRS, which we have, which is a data research team. We have a KT, which is a knowledge management team. So those teams are also there. I would say that they provide like back-end support to what we are delivering to a client. They could be also good places to do in the early part of your career for say 2 3 years. I see some very bright people there, some people who are from the top colleges in Delhi University where I've been as well. And after 2 3 years there, you understand what consulting is as a business. And then if you need to move to a front end client consulting role, you can do that either in the same organization or in a different organization. So that's the other thing to keep in mind.
Okay, good. So yeah, I think what I'll do is, let me
Hmm.
go back to the original slide where we talked about skills, because I think that is sort of what everybody wants to know. So
Yeah.
let me go through all the points again. Um, I think so. So what I'll do is I'll talk about the skills and also where one can look to potentially acquire them. I think the first thing, and I think we'll probably sound very different from other people in consulting who's saying this, because we're saying this with no holds bar. I think the ability to connect with people, EQ, emotional intelligence, to ability to work with people, is paramount for a consultant. If you don't have that, you can be the smartest person in the room. You will make a great analyst. You will make a great senior consultant, and you will not move further. In fact, you will realize The maximum attrition in a consulting firm actually happens in the first 2 years, because most people make very good analysts and very good senior analysts or whatever, because they can work on their own and very brilliant, churn out insane amount of data, work 18 hours a day, all that is great. But the problem is, the moment I get them in a team and they work with people, or they have to lead a small team or lead a small task, everything goes away. So so that's why you will see very smart people from the best of colleges drop out of consulting. Either they go into the startup world, or they go into private equity or investment banking or whatever, where again the individual contributor roles continue to come their way. One thing you have to understand, in consulting there are two things called TC, which is team contribution, and managerial contribution. Those two sets of skills are very important. Can you over a period of time actually manage people or manage things? And can you over at right now actually work in teams? And working in teams is things that you acquired through doing case study work at MBA schools, or doing all kinds of your extracurricular or fests, or organizing events and all that, working on project teams and all that. So I think that is number one. I think detail orientation is the next one, which is when you define outcomes and scope out projects. I think detail orientation comes from the ability to do very strong research and summarizing things. If you can take a huge report and read it cover to cover, let's say 50, 100-page report on an industry, can you summarize it into 10 points for me, which is not a copy paste? I think that's one of the things that a lot of MBAs suffer with, is that their ability to consume large amount of information and then come out with very poignant 10 points. I think that is the sort of the synopsis and the detail orientation piece. Can you pick out details? Can you connect it with an overall story and come up with insights? So I think finding out insights, I think that's just pure practice, right? The more you practice, the more you look at a lot of industry research and content and actually summarize it. I think it's something you have to practice over a period of time.
Yeah.
Project management I've talked about. I think it's a hard skill for anybody. You come from anywhere, you come from marketing, you come from finance, you come from HR. Ability to manage and drive projects, I think, is number one. I think uh, go, if it means you doing the certification, absolutely. I think even if the certification is not accepted by the company, it doesn't matter. But you would have learned project management in the proper technical way. And the where it will shine through is when you will report on your project and show the progress or highlight risk. That will be so much more professional than anybody else, because they would have learned it by experience, you have learned it by training, right? So it's therefore very, very different. I think the other piece is the whole problem solving piece, and we talked about real world problem solving. I think it is, again, whenever you pick up, go through all these certifications and all that, can you apply it to a real world problem and actually tell us uh, why something is happening? So one of my favorite questions was, uh, I asked people, Amazon as a company doesn't make any profit, yet its stock price continues to rise, whereas typical accounting or finance will tell you the price should fall. Why does it go up? And it's funny, 9 out of 10 people can't answer it, because the answer is, one of the reasons is they have a very stable profitability which comes from Amazon Web Services. Now that is pure problem solving. Somebody actually has to go in and open up Amazon's annual report to say, where are they making money, where are they losing money, right? And I think a lot of people will say, oh, can I do an academy course or a Udemy course or a upgrade course? Yeah, you can do that. But can you then go and do this bit of analysis? If you can't do that, if you can't do that problem solving, then I think all those certifications and coursework is not very useful, honestly. uh, and it just becomes a virtual piece of paper per se. It's a nice PNG that you will upload on your LinkedIn profile, but won't serve any purpose beyond that. So I think that's another key piece. I think communication is the last one, and structured communication. So communication, again, a lot of people believe that great flowery English and written English is what you're going to get me across. In fact, I'll tell you for a fact, for a lot of the clients that I worked in, you would speak in English or sometimes in Hindi, because they're not from the top tier schools, and they work in plants and manufacturing facilities and all that, and they speak in Hindi. But what is more important is the quality of communication and how well it is broken down and explained to the client. So I think that is another piece, and structured communication is again by practice. So you will realize with with our answer of this, a lot of this is by practice. It is not just getting some coursework or some upskilling degree. You actually have to practice this, uh, and and only then, when you, let's say, interview or go through the selection process, will this actually show up. Sorry for,
Yeah.
can you, Pranav, I hope I didn't go overboard with the answer.
No, 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 no. I think it helps and it's probably clarified this further. What I was doing actually meanwhile is I picked out three, four questions which I could see in the chat,
Sure,
and
go
I've
ahead.
written some replies. So I've just written it out and I've posted it in one go.
Hmm.
Um, so I think people can just get the answer quickly. Um, but I think what you said was actually very important. That is how um, I think consultants who are looking to hire consulting companies would also be thinking about things. And yeah, I think from the whole session so far, I think people would have gotten a good idea about what consulting is, what is the different type of consulting, how do you get into consulting, what skills are required, and what the scenario is currently. So yeah, I think it's been a
Well,
good interaction for me. Yes, if
I'll answer
we've
a
missed
couple
out
of it.
anything, yeah.
Yeah, a couple of interesting questions. So there's a question around. I have a life sciences background. What are my chances getting into consulting? I think, and I'm going to wager a guess, and hopefully I'm not proven wrong. I think great, because I believe pharma is the one sector that one should really consider getting into. Pharma is
Yeah.
going to have a bull run, and Indian pharma was beaten down to death over the last 5 years or 6 years because of all the junk that pharma has accumulated in terms of bad manufacturing practices and the whole Ranbaxy fiasco and whatnot. Indian pharma was top of its game till mid 2000s, and then basically has had a very bad run for the last 10 years. And I think with COVID and everything, because of the cost efficiencies that exist in Indian pharma for such a long period of time, and such great scientists and R&D capability, which is not so fancy but very effective. I think if you can come in with a life sciences background, um, you can definitely go into consulting, because there will be a lot of work coming on that side. In fact, if I were you, I would go straight for pharma. I would not even consider consulting at this point. Like, if there is one industry which is shining clearly at this point and will shine through for a while, it's pharma. Especially if you are in preventive care. I mean, that just is completely awesome. Like, if you are in preventive care at this point, pharma is probably the best place to look at.
Right.
I think one interesting question is having great growth stories during your work ex. Does it play a role in positioning? Yes, absolutely. I think key thing one people should understand, all these skills we talked about, you need to highlight from your work experience what is it that is transferable into the consulting role. As long as you can talk about domain skills. See, domain skills are very simple, are basically functional skill or industry skills that you gain through experience, right? Of time. Like, you have to be there for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years to gain it. The transferable skills are the skills that you use on a daily basis, that you generate on a daily basis. Like, I mean, I remember for a fact that At one point of time, I interviewed someone, and I asked him. I said, "What kind of leadership positions have you held? How good are you working with people?" And he just looked at me and smiled. He said, "Sir, I used to run a steel plant with 3,000 people. I was the plant manager." And I just kept quiet. I mean, there's no point asking. And I knew one steel plant he was talking about is only the finest in the country. You don't have to ask anything after that, right? Once you've done the leadership role of like that, I don't think you have a challenge leading a set of 5 to 10 smart consultants. Not a big deal. So I think, yeah, as long as you can tie in your work experience with what the consulting role actually demands, I think that'll be very, very useful.
Mm.
Right? I think let's take final set of question. Very interesting. On a
Yeah,
personal level, what made you guys choose consulting as a career? Any experiences you can share which led to this decision? So Pranav, go ahead.
yeah. So I'll try and give the answer quickly. It's not that straight an answer, but I didn't think I'll join consulting after ISB, and which is actually a conversation early on I had with Abhishek. I remember in the start of my ISB journey, I knew him back then as well, and he said, "Never say never. You can figure it as it goes. See how your next few terms go by." And I think I thought at that time that okay, I can go back to the industry or startups anytime I want, but consulting will not be as open as it is to me right now at a B school. So I thought that I'll give it a shot. And the second thing was I just thought that a couple of years of learning initially at consulting always found like forms a good base foundation. So I wanted to get that. I had done some amount of work before ISB, 3 years or so, but that was more with startups. And you get a different learning, different kick over there. But I wanted to get more exposure of like corporate environments, large organizations, how are things done there, what is best in class. So that's the reason I ended up with consulting.
I think my answer was very simple. Just the fact that somebody was starting a practice in sustainability, um, it was just mind blowing for me as an environmental engineer who had worked hardcore in that area, standing on top of smokestacks and underground mines and all that. To have strategy plus technical consulting coming together in a firm like Accenture, it was just a no brainer for me. Very, very different. Point. There are a couple of very interesting questions which finally have come through, and nice to hear them. Is about work-life balance and stress, consulting, and perks. I think some of the key perks of consulting have kind of taken a little bit of a hit, which is staying in nice hotels, or not always, by the way. Depends
Yeah.
on your location. I never got nice hotels because I worked in heavy engineering a lot. Probably Pranav has got nicer hotels, but I think the travel piece, traveling in my case in Accenture, traveled all over the world actually. So travel, meeting new people, uh, talking to the sharpest minds, working with the sharpest minds. I think that's one of the best perks actually. Working with really, really, really smart people, but also working with people who are difficult to work with, right? Because there is also a lot of ego in the room, and there are a lot of alpha personalities. So for someone like me who's not at all an alpha personality, just the ability to work and convince them, I think that's awesome. I think very, very different, for me particularly. And yeah, I think work life balance is not going to be the best as a consultant. I think the answer is very simple. If you want to
Mhm.
add something to that.
Right. How is the family life of a traveler like consultant? I think Abhishek, you can probably answer that better than me. But the earlier thing, I would say one of the other perks which you get with consulting is actually an exit. It's a good place to enter for a good exit as well. A lot of times I've seen that whenever these top MBB consulting companies used to come on campus, everybody used to be like, "Okay, we will join you. You take us. It's great. What do we get as an exit?" Because a lot of people are clear that they will leave after 2, 3 years. So one good thing about consulting is you get diverse industry exposure, and second thing is once you figure what you want, it is much easier to get it after your consulting stint. So if I say that I know I like strategy, I know I like business angle of strategy, so I want to do biz strategy at some startup. My exit after a VCG will probably be easier. And the same goes with private equity. If somebody likes financial modeling and due diligence and they say that they want to go into private equity, that's a good exit as well. So, yeah, I think those are other perks of this. And yeah, work life balance is always a work in progress, I would say. Um, Things have improved, but there is always a way to go. Will the workload decrease as we step up in the ladder? No, it
No,
just
no,
increases, I feel.
it just gets
Um,
worse. It gets worse and worse and worse, actually. It's a
yeah,
lot easier to be an analyst, and everything gets actually much, much, much harder.
yeah.
So there
So,
is, it's a very unrelenting career. I think let's be very, very honest about it.
mm,
Um, it's not a relenting career where just because you have a large team doesn't mean that you can relax, actually.
yeah. So I think once every week, I think consultants would think that, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? And that creates a sense of doubt. But just as soon as you get like a client buy-in on your proposed solution and you see that, okay, this impact will happen because of me, or I got this problem right, you feel that sense of satisfaction and it goes away. So one of the partners I worked with, he used to keep saying that it's like a seesaw journey. Like as much as you may say that I want to flatten it and I want to keep it in this range, it doesn't happen. It just swings like this, and that's for everybody.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
consulting has its rhythm. Like you will go through very busy years and then you will probably have a slightly quieter, not a year, but a period. So it's a little bit of a seesaw. I think mm, at least I don't regret it. I think it was a great, for me, it was a complete package because it gave me the technical and the domain satisfaction because I continued in my degree and using all my technical skills as well as management skills. So it was a perfect combination. It's like how someone in Three Idiots said, "Why would you do an engineering degree when you did finance?" But in my case, I did my engineering degree, I did my MBA, and I did both financial and technical consulting together, management consulting, in all bundled in one. So it was just awesome. So for me, it was a little bit of a. I think I got lucky, I guess. Um, Okay, I think we'll take the final question because we've already shot over time.
gone. Yeah,
So, just in because it is a weekend still, and I'm no longer a consultant, unlike Pranav.
yeah,
I think does guesswork or luck help? Um, I think personally, I would say uh, instinct really helps, and
yeah,
you develop instinct over a period of time, especially with very troublesome projects or very ambiguous projects if you are in the depth in the numbers and if you have a great footing with the customer or the client or you have a very good message for the so one thing I will always tell people, don't get too hung up on data. Also do a almost like a physical check of the customer, right? Talk to people, get a general sense. It's like a doctor sees an x-ray but also kind of touches you on the body and says, does it pain? I mean, obviously it's broken, it's going to pain, right? But they still probe around and poke you to just see if there is pain, right? So there is always a clinical and like an overall check that can be done. So I think that's something as a consultant, if you continue to do that, that creates very strong gut instinct, I think.
yeah. Completely agree with that. I think the answer is what I think Abhishek said, that you can't go with luck or guesswork, honestly. You can go with intuition, go with your gut. That's a better option. And yeah, I think sometimes you're honest with the client and you say that this is how I feel about it. It's also fine. And thank you for all the good comments which you're sharing. It's great to get the.
Oh, the consultant who finds that answer for that one, I think you go and collect a check with from PM Modi, who can figure out when
Yeah,
Corona is going to end. Yeah, I
I
think
think so.
if you do, let us know that person. We'll get them for the masterclass. We
Yeah,
will send out the details to everybody. Don't worry, you're all connected. When we have the next masterclass, we're going to bring in more consultants with different experience, and you'll get it on. Just follow us on different social media platforms. MBA Trek is there. We are also on Instagram, not on TikTok yet, and very happy not to be there. So please just follow us there, and we'll continue to post that. So we'll see all
Yeah.
of you there. Wonderful. Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so
everybody.
much.
You will get the recording on your email. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.